a powerful man, an invisible waitress, and one sentence that shattered all of his certainties. Daniel Harrington was the CEO of a multi-million-dollar company, used to giving orders, used to being obeyed, used to never waiting. That day he walked into a simple restaurant, demanding speed, efficiency, perfection. But what he didn't expect was that a tired, single mother waitress, invisible to the eyes of the world, would say the one sentence capable of bringing down everything he had built. She didn't yell, she didn't beg, she didn't bow. She simply asked, "When was the last time you thought about your son before thinking about your next deal?" And in that moment, the most powerful CEO in the room became the smallest man there. This is the story of how one sentence changed everything, and maybe it will change you too. Press play and get ready. Tuesday morning in Manhattan started like every other for Daniel Harrington. Coffee at 6, meeting at 7, decisions moving millions before 9. He was the CEO of one of the largest tech companies in the country, and his routine allowed no empty spaces. Every minute had a purpose. Every second had a price. That morning, however, something went off script. A crucial meeting with international investors dragged on longer than expected. When it finally ended, Daniel realized he had skipped both breakfast and lunch. His stomach growled, but he ignored it. He was used to ignoring his body's signals. The problem was that the next meeting would start in 40 minutes, and he needed to be there, present, focused, in control. His driver suggested a high-end restaurant a few blocks away, but Daniel refused. There was no time for reservations and waiters who took forever explaining dishes. He pointed to a small diner on the corner of Lexington Avenue, the kind with apple pies in the window and coffee that never got cold. "Right here," he said, without looking at the driver. The place was modest. Walls covered in white tiles stained by time, vinyl chairs patched up with duct tape, and a lingering smell of bacon and drip coffee. The kind of place Daniel Harrington never set foot in, but it didn't matter. He wasn't there for the experience, he was there out of necessity. When he walked in, a few heads turned. Impeccable suit, Swiss watch on his wrist, straight posture. He stood out, but Daniel didn't notice the stares, or pretended not to. He chose a table by the window, sat down without taking off his jacket, and grabbed his phone before even looking at the menu. 3 emails, 2 notifications, 1 missed call. He typed quick replies while the restaurant kept its usual rhythm. Plates being served, low conversations, the metallic clatter from the kitchen in the background. Everything worked the way it should, everything except time. And Daniel Harrington hated waiting. 2 minutes passed, then 3. He looked up, scanning the room. No one came. He took a deep breath, went back to his phone, but now irritation was starting to rise. He wasn't used to being ignored. Not in boardrooms, not at gala dinners, and certainly not in some corner diner. Another minute. He tapped his fingers on the table, a sharp sound that echoed through the room. A few customers glanced over, but no one said a word. Daniel felt the heat creep up his neck. This wasn't about food, it was about respect, about efficiency, about the fact that even there, even in that simple place, he expected things to work. Finally, he raised his hand, a firm, impatient gesture. That's when she appeared, a woman with tan skin, her hair pulled into a low bun, an apron tied at the waist, and a name tag reading Camilla barely clipped to her uniform. She moved fast, carrying a tray full of plates in one hand and holding an order pad in the other. Her face showed exhaustion, not the kind that comes from one bad night of sleep, but the kind that builds up over weeks, months, years. She stopped at the table next to his, set down 2 plates, smiled politely at the customers, and then turned to Daniel. "Good morning. Sorry for the wait. I'll take your order now," she said, her voice steady but slightly out of breath. Daniel didn't return the greeting. He simply pushed the menu back toward her. Turkey sandwich, no mayo, whole wheat bread, and coffee, black, fast. Camilla wrote it down without hesitation, but something in his tone made her lift her eyes for a second. He wasn't looking at her. He was looking at his watch. "Of course, sir. I'll be right back with your order," she replied. Before turning and heading to the kitchen, Daniel went back to his phone. The irritation was still there, but at least now he had been acknowledged. All that remained was to wait for the food to arrive quickly, because Daniel Harrington didn't have time to waste. Not on meetings, not on people, not on anything that didn't move his schedule forward. And while he typed yet another email, Camilla stepped into the kitchen, put the order in the queue, and took a deep breath. Just another customer, just another table, just another shift. She didn't know that in a few minutes, everything would change. Camila Torres was 32 years old, but she carried the weight of an entire lifetime on her shoulders. She woke up every day at 5 in the morning, made breakfast for her son, dropped him off at the neighbor's house who watched him while she worked, and took 2 buses to reach the diner on Lexington Avenue. The commute took an hour and 15 minutes. She never complained. Working as a waitress wasn't the dream she had when she was younger. Camila studied business administration at a community college and always believed that one day she'd have her own business, maybe a small clothing shop or a coffee place. But life has a cruel way of rewriting plans. When she found out she was pregnant, her boyfriend had disappeared. When her son was born, the bills started coming in faster than her paycheck could cover. Now, 6 years later, she was a single mother to a boy named Lucas, a smart, energetic kid who loved drawing superheroes and asked questions about everything. Every night before bed, he asked his mom to tell him a story. And every night, no matter how tired she was, Camila made one up. That morning before leaving the house, Lucas hugged her tightly. "Mom, are you coming back early today?" he asked, his big eyes full of hope. Camila knelt in front of him and fixed the collar of his school uniform. "I'll try, sweetheart. But if I'm late, Mrs. Irene will take care of you, okay?" "I know, but I wish you could stay with me," Lucas said, lowering his head. Camilla's heart clenched. She held her son's face in her hands. "I wish I could too, buddy. But Mommy has to work so we can have nice things, okay? When I get back, we'll have dinner together and you can tell me all about your day." Lucas nodded, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. Camila kissed his forehead and rushed out the door, because if she missed the bus, she'd be late. And being late meant risking her job. And risking her job meant risking everything. At the diner, the rush started early. Camila waited table after table, smiled even when customers were rude, carried heavy trays even when her back ached. She knew every item on the menu, every regular's preference, every shortcut to speed up service. She was good at what she did, but being good didn't mean it was easy. That morning the restaurant was busier than usual. 2 servers had called out, and Camila was covering extra tables. She didn't complain. She never did. She just tightened her apron, secured her hair more firmly, and kept going. It was in the middle of the shift that she stopped for just a second. Just 1 second. She was carrying a tray full of plates when her phone vibrated in her pocket. She couldn't answer, but she saw the notification on the screen. A message from Mrs. Irene. "Lucas has a fever. Nothing serious, but he's asking for you." Camila felt the world stop. Her chest tightened. Her hands trembled slightly, but she held the tray steady. She took a deep breath. She couldn't leave. Not now. Not in the middle of her shift. She needed to finish the shift. She needed the money. She needed to hold it together. She typed a quick reply. "I'll come as soon as I can. Give him fever medicine. Thank you." She put the phone away, straightened her posture, and went back out to the dining room. But her mind was far away. It was at home, with Lucas. She pictured her son lying on the couch, his forehead warm, calling for her. Guilt pounded in her chest like a constant drum. It was in that state of mind that she served the next table, the table where Daniel Harrington was sitting. She took his order without really listening, smiled automatically, responded on autopilot, and when she went into the kitchen she put the order in the queue, but her thoughts were still with Lucas. The cook shouted that the sandwich was ready. Camila grabbed the plate, placed it on the tray along with the cup of black coffee, and hurried out. There were 3 other tables waiting. There were bills to pay. There was a child with a fever at home. She moved too fast to notice the cup was slightly tilted on the tray, too fast to realize the coffee was too close to the edge. When she reached Daniel's table, she carefully placed the plate in front of him. But as she grabbed the cup, her movement was abrupt, just a millimeter off, just 1 second of distraction. The coffee spilled. Not much, just a few drops. They landed on the edge of the table, barely missing the sleeve of his suit. Daniel looked up immediately. His face hardened. Camila froze. She grabbed a cloth quickly and tried to wipe it up. "I'm sorry, sir. It was an accident. An accident?" He cut in, his voice cold and sharp. She swallowed hard. The entire restaurant seemed to fall silent, and it was at that moment that something inside Daniel Harrington decided this couldn't just slide. Daniel Harrington didn't stand up. He didn't need to. His posture said everything. Rigid shoulders, locked jaw, eyes fixed on Camilla as if she were an incompetent employee in a boardroom meeting. He took a deep breath, the kind that comes right before a calculated reprimand. "An accident," he repeated slowly, savoring every syllable. "How long have you worked here?" Camilla was still holding the cloth in her hand, her heart pounding out of rhythm. She knew his tone wasn't a question. It was a trap. 3 years, sir," she replied, keeping her voice steady while feeling the heat rise to her face. 3 years, Daniel repeated, shaking his head in disapproval. "And in 3 years, you still haven't learned how to serve a cup of coffee without spilling it?" The silence in the restaurant was deafening. Some customers stopped eating. Others looked down, pretending not to see, but everyone was listening. Camilla felt the weight of every stare, every held breath. "It was an accident, sir. I apologize. I'll bring you another cup right away." She tried to keep her dignity, but her voice came out softer than she intended. Daniel leaned slightly forward, resting his elbows on the table. "This isn't about the cup. It's about attention, commitment, doing the basics right. Do you think in the real world, in a real company, a mistake like this would be tolerated?" Camilla clenched the cloth between her fingers. She knew this kind of man. She had seen many of them before. Men who used power as armor, who measured people's worth by the size of their bank accounts, who never looked down unless it was to step on someone. "Sir, I understand your dissatisfaction, but nothing," he cut her off, his voice rising slightly. "You have a simple job, take orders, serve food, don't spill coffee, and still you manage to fail. What does that say about you?" The words hit Camilla like punches. Her eyes burned, but she didn't let the tears fall. Not there. Not in front of him. Not in front of everyone. The restaurant manager, a short, middle-aged man named Robert, quickly appeared beside the table. He wore a nervous smile, trying to defuse the situation. "Sir, please accept our apologies. I'll personally make sure that—" "I'm not talking to you," Daniel interrupted without even looking at him. "I'm talking to her." Robert stepped back, embarrassed. Camilla remained standing, her legs trembling slightly, but her posture upright. She wasn't going to bow. She wasn't going to beg. She wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of seeing her broken. Daniel continued, every word measured, every pause calculated to maximize impact. "You know what the problem is? People like you think that just showing up, doing the bare minimum is enough. There's no excellence, no standard, just mediocrity disguised as effort." Camilla took a deep breath. She felt something growing inside her. It wasn't anger. It was something deeper. It was the realization that no matter what she said, to that man she would always be invisible, always replaceable, always less, but she wasn't less. "Sir," she began, her voice firm now, "I apologize for the coffee. It was a mistake, and I take responsibility for it, but—" "Responsibility?" Daniel let out a short, humorless laugh. "Responsibility is not making the mistake in the first place. Responsibility is paying attention. You were distracted. Admit it." Camilla closed her eyes for a second. Lucas, the message, the fever, the medicine, the guilt, it all came rushing back at once. "Yes," she said, opening her eyes. "I was distracted." Daniel leaned back in his chair, as if he had just won an argument. "So you admit you failed because of incompetence?" "I admit that I'm human," Camilla replied, and for the first time, her gaze met his, equal to equal. Daniel frowned. That wasn't the submission he was expecting. "Human," he repeated with disdain. "That's the excuse you're going to use? In the corporate world, being human doesn't pay the bills. Efficiency does. Results do." Camilla didn't look away. "And in your world, sir, what pays besides results?" The question caught Daniel off guard. He opened his mouth to answer, but hesitated. Something in her tone, in the way she stood her ground, threw him off balance for a fraction of a second, but he didn't let it show. Instead, he leaned forward again, eyes narrowing. "You want answers? Then give me a reason. A convincing reason why I shouldn't demand that you be fired right now." The entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath. And Camilla, her heart tight and the image of her son burning in her mind, took a deep breath. It was time to tell the truth. Daniel Harrington crossed his arms and waited. It wasn't a patient wait. It was the wait of someone who had already decided the outcome, but wanted to watch the other person struggle before the final blow. He had seen this scene hundreds of times in boardrooms. the cornered employee trying to justify the unjustifiable, searching for words that didn't exist. He expected excuses. He expected pleas. He expected Camilla to lower her head, apologize, beg for her professional survival. That was how the game worked. It always had. "I'm waiting," he said, his voice calm but heavy with authority. "Give me a reason. One single reason that justifies this level of carelessness." Camilla was still holding the cloth. Her fingertips were white from gripping it so tightly. She looked at the floor for a moment, not out of shame, but because she needed to gather strength. She needed to decide whether she would keep being invisible or finally exist in front of that man. When she lifted her face again, her eyes were wet, but steady. "My son is sick," she said, her voice trembling but clear. Daniel blinked. That wasn't what he expected. "What? My son?" Camilla repeated, and this time her voice was stronger. "He's 6 years old. He has a fever at home. The neighbor who watches him sent me a message a few minutes ago. He's asking for me." The silence that followed was different. It was no longer the silence of embarrassment or curiosity. It was the silence of hearing something that changes the temperature of the room. Daniel slowly uncrossed his arms. His face lost some of its rigidity, but the mask was still there. "And you think that justifies it?" he asked, but the conviction in his voice was no longer the same. "No," Camilla replied, shaking her head. "I don't think it justifies the mistake, but it explains the distraction, because while I was serving your table, I was thinking about whether my son was okay, whether he was in pain, whether I should have stayed home with him, even knowing that would mean losing a day's pay and not having money for rent." Daniel didn't respond. He just looked at her as if processing her words. Camilla continued, and now there was a growing strength in her voice. "You asked me what I have to say, so I'll say it. I work 6 days a week. I wake up at 5 in the morning. I take 2 buses to get here. I stay on my feet for 8, 9 hours straight. I serve people who treat me like I'm invisible. I smile even when I'm exhausted. And I do all of that because I have a son who depends on me. Only me." She took a step forward, and Daniel instinctively leaned back slightly in his chair. "I don't have an assistant. I don't have a driver. I don't have anyone who fixes my problems when I'm too busy. When my son gets sick, I'm the one who takes care of him. When the electricity bill is late, I'm the one who negotiates. When he asks why his father isn't there, I'm the one who makes up an answer that won't hurt him." The words now poured out non-stop, like a dam breaking. "So yes, sir, I was distracted. And yes, I spilled coffee, and I apologize for that. But I will not apologize for being a mother. I will not apologize for worrying about my child while I try to survive in a world that tells me every single day that I'm not enough." Daniel was frozen. The arrogance had drained from his face. Now there was something else there, something he tried to hide, but that was starting to crack through the surface. Camilla took a deep breath, trying to hold back the tears threatening to fall. "You want a reason? Here it is. I made a mistake because I'm human. Because I have a heart that breaks every time my son needs me and I can't be there. Because I carry a weight you probably will never understand." She took another step forward, now close enough to the table that she could see her reflection in his eyes. "And you know what's worse? Tomorrow I'll wake up at 5 in the morning again. I'll take the same buses. I'll serve the same tables. I'll smile at the same people who don't see my face. Because I don't have a choice. Because my son needs to eat. Because rent doesn't pay itself." Daniel opened his mouth, but no words came out. Camilla wiped her eyes quickly with the back of her hand. "So if you want to get me fired, go ahead. But before you do, answer me one thing. When was the last time you thought about your son before thinking about your next deal?" The question landed like a bomb. Daniel went pale. His lips parted slightly, but no sound came out. Because for the first time in years, he didn't have an answer. Daniel Harrington didn't move, not because he chose to stay still, but because something inside him had frozen. Camilla's question kept echoing in his mind, crashing against the walls he had built over the years. "When was the last time you thought about your son before thinking about your next deal?" He tried to look away, but he couldn't. Camilla's eyes were still locked on him, waiting, not with anger, not with desperation, just with the raw truth of someone who didn't have anything left to lose. Daniel started, but his voice gave out. Camilla took a step back, adjusting her apron. She wiped her hands on the cloth, took a deep breath, and when she spoke again, it was with a devastating calm. "My son asked me last night if I was going to be home for breakfast today. I said no. He asked if I was going to pick him up from school. I said no. He asked if we could watch a movie together this weekend. I said maybe. She paused, and the silence sat heavy on everyone in the restaurant. You know why I said maybe? Because I work 6 days a week, and on the 7th, I have to do laundry, clean the house, pay bills, cook for the whole week. Because free time is a luxury I can't afford. Daniel swallowed hard. He knew he should say something, anything, but the words were stuck somewhere between his throat and his chest. Camilla kept going, her voice softer now, but every word carrying weight. But even so, every night before he goes to sleep, I sit on the edge of his bed. I listen to his day. I make up stories. I kiss him goodnight. Because no matter how tired I am, no matter how many hours I worked, he's still the most important thing in my life. Daniel closed his eyes for a second, and in that second, something he had buried a long time ago started to rise. A memory. An 8-year-old boy sitting in the waiting room of an office, flipping through old magazines while he waited for his dad to finish just one more meeting. The dad who promised to take him to the park. The dad who promised to be there for the soccer game. The dad who always said, "Next week, kiddo." Daniel opened his eyes and saw Camilla still standing there, waiting. She tilted her head slightly. "Do you have kids, sir?" The question hit like a punch to the gut. Daniel hesitated. He tried to keep the mask on, but it was cracking. "I do," he said, his voice rough. "A son." "How old?" 15. Camilla nodded slowly. "And when was the last time you had a real conversation with him?" Daniel didn't answer, because he didn't know. He couldn't remember. The meetings, the international flights, the conferences, the business dinners, it all blended into a fog of obligations that always seemed more urgent than being home. "I don't know," he admitted, and for the first time his voice sounded small. Camilla took another step back, and now there was something like compassion in her eyes. "Then maybe you should think about that," she said quietly. "Because one day he's going to stop asking. He's going to stop waiting. And when you finally have time, he won't be there anymore, waiting for you." The words slammed into Daniel like an avalanche. His chest tightened. His breathing got hard. Because he knew that boy. He was that boy. The son who waited. The son who stopped waiting. The son who grew up without a father. Even with his father still alive. And now, he was the father. Camilla grabbed the empty tray from another table, tucked the loose strand of hair back into her bun, and looked at Daniel one last time. "I'll bring you another cup of coffee, sir, and I'll be careful not to spill it." She started to turn, but Daniel reached out instinctively, almost touching her arm. "Wait," he said, his voice breaking. Camilla stopped, but didn't fully turn around. She just glanced over her shoulder. Daniel opened his mouth, trying to find the right words. "But what do you even say after a mirror that brutal?" He tried, but his voice failed again. Camilla waited one more second. When she realized he wasn't going to finish, she simply nodded slightly. "It's okay, sir," she said, with an unexpected gentleness. "We don't need words all the time. Sometimes we just need presence." And then she turned and walked back to the kitchen, leaving Daniel alone with the weight of that sentence. Little by little, the restaurant drifted back into its rhythm. Customers resumed their conversations. The sound of forks and knives clinked again, but Daniel stayed still, staring at the empty space in front of him. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about meetings. He wasn't thinking about profits. He wasn't thinking about business. He was thinking about a 15-year-old boy who was probably at home, alone, waiting for someone who never showed up. Daniel Harrington sat there for a few more minutes, but he didn't touch the sandwich. He didn't drink the coffee Camilla brought back carefully, without spilling a single drop. He just looked out the window, watching people rush down the sidewalk, each of them carrying their own invisible weight. For the first time in a long time, he felt small. Not small as in weak or lesser, small as in human, vulnerable, flawed. He had built an entire career on the idea that control was power, that efficiency was virtue, that emotions were a waste of time. And now, sitting in that corner diner, he realized how much he had wasted. He thought about his son, Ethan, 15, dark hair like his, eyes that used to light up when he was little, but that now carried a distance Daniel didn't know when it had started. He tried to remember the last time they truly talked, not about grades, not about college, not about future plans, just talked. He couldn't. He picked up his phone and stared at the screen. 3 missed calls, 7 unread emails, 2 meetings scheduled for the afternoon. The corporate world was still spinning, demanding attention, demanding presence. But for the first time, Daniel hesitated before responding. He typed a name into the search bar. Ethan. The last message between them was from 3 weeks ago. Ethan asking if his dad would be home for dinner. Daniel answering, "Meeting late. Order delivery. 3 weeks." He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He felt something breaking in his chest. It wasn't anger. It wasn't frustration. It was regret. The kind that hurts, because it comes with the realization that lost time doesn't come back. When he opened his eyes again, Camilla was moving through the room with another tray, serving a table on the other side. She smiled politely at an elderly couple, wrote down their order carefully, did her job with dignity, like nothing had happened, like she hadn't just dismantled a man with a few sentences. Daniel called the manager, Robert, who came quickly, still wearing that nervous smile. "Yes, sir? Is there anything else I can do?" "That waitress," Daniel said, subtly pointing toward Camilla. "How much does she make an hour?" Robert blinked, surprised by the question. "Well, base pay is minimum, plus tips, of course." "How much?" $12 an hour, sir." Daniel did the math in his head. 8 hours a day, 6 days a week, less than $3,000 a month, to raise a child alone in New York, to pay rent, food, transportation, school. He pulled his wallet out, grabbed a few business cards he had in there, and then stopped. He stared at the cards, at the name printed in gold letters, CEO, tech company, millions in revenue, and he realized none of it mattered in that moment. He slid the cards back into his wallet and pulled out several bills. He left $500 on the table, not as a tip, not as charity, as recognition, as a silent apology. He stood up, grabbed his jacket, and walked toward the door. Before he stepped out, he glanced back one last time. Camilla was laughing at something the elderly couple had said. A real laugh, tired but real. She didn't see him leave, and maybe that was for the best. Outside, the noise of New York swallowed him again. Honking horns, voices, sirens. But Daniel didn't call his driver. He didn't check his phone. He just started walking. He walked 2 blocks before stopping in front of a toy store. In the window there was a robotics kit. He remembered Ethan mentioning something about robotics months ago, or maybe it had been last year. He wasn't sure. He went inside. 20 minutes later, he came out with a bag. Not just the robotics kit, also a board game, something they could play together, something that required presence. On the way back to the car, he finally picked up his phone, but not to answer emails, not to confirm meetings. He typed a message to Ethan. "I'll be home at 6. Let's have dinner together. No phones. No meetings. Just me and you. Deal?" He hesitated before sending it, because he knew one message didn't erase years of absence. He knew one dinner didn't rebuild a relationship, but he also knew he had to start somewhere. He hit send. The reply came 3 minutes later. "For real? Okay. See you later, Dad." Daniel smiled. A small, shaky smile, but real. He put his phone away and got into the car. "Home?" he told the driver. "But sir, you have a 3 p.m. meeting with—" "Cancel it." Daniel cut in, firm. "Cancel all my meetings today." The driver looked in the rearview mirror, surprised, but just nodded. As the car moved through Manhattan, Daniel stared out the window. He thought about Camilla, thought about her son, Lucas, waiting at home, thought about Ethan, maybe waiting too, but no longer believing anyone was coming. And for the first time in years, Daniel Harrington understood something fundamental. Authority doesn't come from a title. It comes from the ability to see the other person as human, especially when they hold no power at all. There were no more meetings that day, no more urgent emails, no more excuses. There was only a father going home, too late to fix everything, but still in time to begin. And sometimes, beginning is the only act of courage that truly matters.